Hello there, my friends. Evolutionary Energy Arts family, take two.
Take two.
Yeah, you can always tell when it's a good one when you get the gremlins going.
It never fails, guys.
Yeah, and I should say, maybe the demons, but not the Damons.
Yes, good point.
And we're not talking about Matt Damon.
Nope.
So this is Hesiod. Who is Hesiod? Well, he was an ancient Greek poet, generally thought to have been active between 750 and 650 BC, around the time of Homer. Of course, Homer is so famous, for the Iliad and the Odyssey, and got all these, amazing stories that we get from Greek mythology. Without these two guys, we would be, we wouldn't have the rich history that we do and understanding perhaps of how they thought over there in ancient Greece. He's generally regarded as the first written poet in the Western tradition to regard himself as an individual persona with an active role to play in his subject. Ancient authors credit Hesiod and Homer with establishing Greek religious customs. Modern scholars refer to him as a major source on Greek mythology, farming techniques, also early economic thought, and archaic Greek astronomy and ancient timekeeping.
And this is a guy with a lot of character.
And we look at the Greek mythology, the family tree. So we have over here chaos, right? The void. Now that's something that's echoed everywhere. It really is. So when we look at, if we go into the Vedic tradition, the Indus Valley tradition, of which, again, you have Hinduism, you have Buddhism that comes out of it, you have Jainism as well, and others as well. When we look at the Western mystery tradition as well, I should say, in the Kabbalah, it's all chaos. Now, chaos, the void, this is, again, you could interpret it as Shiva, and being that which is not. It's that which has not yet been manifested. It's the universal consciousness without any sort of manifestation. And when we look at quantum physics, we see that until the observer observes, things are just kind of random. And then it's the fact that when we observe, that things take a shape, take a form.
And these are things that are, we're learning about more and more every day.
Then we have the primordial gods, and you have Gaia in there as well as others. The forces of nature, so we could also equate that primordial energy, well, a lot of different ways. For one, we could start looking at it as, that is the actual process of creation through the elements. And when we're talking about the elements, well, the archangels are the rulers of the elements according to the Western tradition. So you have the four archangels: Raphael, air; Michael, fire; Gabriel, water; and Uriel, earth. And they are the rulers of those forces of creation which bring us the manifest universe.
Yeah, and I feel a lot of these things have been kept from us for a while.
Now, we could also view all that in its totality as the divine goddess or the great mother. And that's another way we could look at it. Then we have Shiva, which is that which is not. We could equate Shiva, again, to chaos, the void, the universal mind, without there being any sort of yet manifestation, working through the elements, right, the primordial gods, and bringing us, the mother in which we live, we walk, Gaia, and the entirety of this manifest universe.
That's a beautiful thing.
And then we have the Titans below them, including Kronos, who is Saturn, or time as well. And there's a lot of ways we could go into looking at that. And then we have the Olympian gods. So as we go into this, these gods tend to get more and more human-like. Very, very much so. Very, very much so. Very, very human-like. They even have tempers. They lust, and they get angry, and they might even swear and drink and have parties.
Ultimately, there's a cycle to this.
There is. And we're very familiar, many of us, with all these different stories of these gods. So a lot of words have been twisted over the years, and a lot of things are taken to be what they were not originally intended to be. And the word daemon is one. And some of you out there said, did he say demon? because that's all that you've been brought up knowing is demons, and don't understand that daemon is the Latin root word for the ancient Greek daemon, which basically meant God, godlike power, or even fate, which originally referred to a lesser deity or guiding spirit. So, benevolent, basically, such as the daemons of the ancient Greek religion and mythology and of later Hellenistic religion and philosophy. The word is derived from Proto-Indo-European daemon, provider, divider of fortunes and destinies, and from the root da, which is to divide. Daemons were possibly seen as the souls of men of the Golden Age, acting as tutelary deities, according to an entry in Liddell and Scott's book. So when we look at this, Indo-European, and for those of you that haven't really gotten into this, Indo is, again, Indus Valley. And, the oldest language and tradition that we have comes out of the Indus Valley, Indo-European, Indus Valley. And so, daemons were not anything, they weren't demons. This is something totally different. It's been twisted because of the modern thought, which all gets traced back to, again, Constantine and the version of the Bible that he put together, in order to basically control and keep his empire, intact. Because Christianity was running like wildfire throughout the empire, and it was uncontrollable because there's over 200 different gospels out there. People believe totally different things. You had Gnostic Christians. We still had the Essenes, who were a mystical group of people of the Jewish tradition, of which Jesus more than likely was part of that group, and definitely John the Baptist as well, as they performed water baptism, and they lived in a communal setting where nobody had any private ownership of anything. They just shared. And, like when Jesus said to the rich man's son, if you really want to follow me, sell all your belongings, give them to the poor, and let's get going. And he couldn't do it, because, again, you can't serve God and money. And not to get too far off on tangents, but just to say how what we have today, and now we are in, we have been in a dark age of unenlightenment. And it's very, very apparent when we see, all the war, all the strife, all the violence in the streets, the lack of caring for each other, spending more money on ways to kill each other than ways to support each other with food, clothing, and shelter. If we spent the same amount of money we spent the amount of money that we do on the military just in this country alone, there would not be a single hungry person in this planet. There would not be a single person without shelter. This is why we have been in a dark age, which is ruled by fear, controlled by ego. And so what is a tutelary deity? A tutelary deity is a deity or spirit who is a guardian, a protector, a patron, of a particular place, geographic feature, person, lineage, nation, culture, or occupation. Interesting. In later Greek and Roman religion, one type of tutelary deity, a genius, functions as a personal deity or daemon of an individual from birth to death. So we could call that a spirit guide, could we not? And also in the Indus Valley, in the Proto-Indo-European tradition there is the line of thinking that, certain mountains will have certain spirits in them. And we've felt that. We've gone from one mountain, which felt wonderful, to another area that felt just downright ugly.
Oh, there's no doubt in my mind, yeah.
And so, these are nature spirits. And when we talk about archangels, these are beings that are, the ultimate kind of rulers in the Western tradition of nature and everything that's created in it. But there's all sorts of other nature spirits that are underneath them, maintaining order. There's little individual, and we were aware of this in these other ages because we had expanded abilities, which are coming online right now, where we could perceive things that are not just in this one density. Just like when we look at our reality, it's just like tuning a radio channel, and you go from one signal to another, and there's a totally different channel there. You go from country to classical to hard rock, whatever. It's the same thing with our reality. Now we're expanding. Our perceptions are expanding at an exponential rate. So many people will start to notice things out of the corner of your eye. You might see a light, by this little flower, and that light is, what we might call a fairy or some sort of, being in the Devic realm whose job is to just simply protect, guide, and help that one particular flower grow.
It's a very natural, beautiful process.
And people that are in tune with nature, just like the Native Americans that were here in the land, understood that. They could see that. They could feel that. They could sense that. And they also could do it back in the old days here over in Greece and Rome as well. They recognize these things. So when we're talking about daemons, they have nothing to do with demons. Daemons have been demonized by, the traditional fundamentalist point of view. And that's a very unfortunate thing, because all this has done is locked us into a tiny little tunnel vision. It's really a tunnel vision is what most people have. They see it through the lens of that tradition they've been brought up with. And that's why we are always pushing to have people study other people's traditions and look for commonalities.
It's very important that they control our perspective too.
And so we have 5 ages of man, according to Hesiod. 5 different ages. And what we have is a devolution of man. Because when we go to the farthest age back, the Golden Age, it was a wonderful age. And man lived a much better life than we do now. And in the Silver Age, it got a little bit worse. In the Bronze Age, even worse. Then we have the Age of Heroes. And then we have the Iron Age. And the Age of Heroes is fascinating too. So really what we have, see that Age of Heroes, you see how they have that like sticking out a little bit? Because really what we have is 4 ages and then this little aside. And it's a very, very interesting aside as well. So one of the things that's fascinating is the Silver Age, you have Saturn leaves, because Saturn was the one in charge of the Golden Age. So there's a lot of legends about that, and there's a lot of lines of thought to do with that. And Velikovsky is one person that thinks that maybe the positioning of the planets as we see, and this solar system we see right now, is not how it always was. Saturn, for instance, Saturn can also be equated, it has been equated with Satan, which is interesting. And of course, the Jews' Sabbath day is Saturday, which is Saturn's day. Interesting. So Hesiod's 5 ages of man, and there's a PDF here too, which gives you the totality of that writing there. The classic Greek 5 ages of man was first written down in the 8th century BCE, a poem written by a shepherd named Hesiod, who along with Homer, one of the earliest Greek epic poets. He likely based his work on an unidentified older legend, possibly from Mesopotamia or Egypt. Or, see again, this shows you the bias there. Or possibly even, maybe Indus Valley as well. So according to Greek legend, Hesiod was a farmer from the Boeotian region of Greece who was out tending his sheep one day when he met the 9 muses. The 9 muses were the daughters of Zeus and Mnemosyne, which is memory in some lines of thinking, divine beings who inspire creators of all kind. Yes, everybody has to have their personal muse, and I have mine sitting right next to me here. So, divine beings who inspire creators of all kinds, including poets, speakers, and artists. By convention, the muses were always invoked at the beginning of an epic poem. On this day, the muses inspired Hesiod to write the 800-line epic poem called The Works and Days. In it, Hesiod tells 3 myths: the stories of Prometheus, the theft of fire, tale of Pandora and her box of ills, and the 5 ages of man. The 5 ages of man is a Greek creation story that traces the lineage of mankind through 5 successive ages, or races, including the Golden Age, Silver Age, the Bronze Age, the Age of Heroes, and the present, which is the Iron Age. So the Golden Age was the mythical first period of man. The people of the Golden Age were formed by, or for, the Titan Kronos. Okay, so Golden Age, Titan, Kronos, whom the Romans called Saturn. Mortals lived like gods, never knowing sorrow or toil. When they died, it is as if they were falling asleep. Nobody worked or grew unhappy. Spring never ended. It is even described as a period in which people aged backwards. When they died, they became daemones, which is a Greek word only later converted to demons. Only later, and this is a mistranslation really by the church in order to control and enslave people's minds. And so they roamed the earth. When Zeus overcame the Titans, the golden age ended. So Zeus overcame the Titans, and the golden age ends. According to the poet Pindar, from 517 to 438 BCE, the Greek mind, gold has an allegorical significance, meaning the radiance of light, good fortune, blessedness, and all the fairest and the best. In Babylonia, gold was the metal of the sun. So in the Silver and Bronze Ages, during Hesiod's Silver Age, the Olympian god Zeus was in charge. Zeus caused this generation of man to be created as vastly inferior to the gods in appearance and wisdom. He divided the year into 4 seasons. Okay, so there is the line of thinking that, and there's legends to this fact too, that before the moon was here and before a big cataclysm, the world was not at the 23.5 degrees it is now. It was basically straight. And so the weather wasn't as chaotic as what we see now, and it was a much more amicable place to have abundant food and more security as well, not having the cataclysms that we see now. There's Native American legends and legends also from the Etruscans that say the moon was brought here by these not so benevolent beings and put here in the sky, because they remember a time when the moon was not here. And there again, we also have obviously the asteroid belt, which was, according to some legends, it could have been Tiamat, which was a planet from which Earth was created that was destroyed when Nibiru came through, according to some legends. Very all interesting stuff. There is the line of thinking, like, what's up with Venus? Why is Venus rotating in the opposite direction at a much faster speed? Because Venus's year is longer than its day. Yeah, there's something really bizarre about the current formation of the solar system. Uranus as well is inclined at a really strange angle, kind of on its side. So what happened? And then there's a line of thinking that all these myths are just because of some great cosmic cataclysm, and so we convert this to the wars of the gods in our mind because there was great chaotic destruction. Maybe we even saw like a huge flash as a planet's being destroyed by something, and we couldn't handle it in any other way, so we made all these different legends up to bring that story across.
Yeah, to help our human mind be able to understand.
So Zeus is now in charge. Saturn's gone. Interesting, too, because there are depictions of Moses with horns in his head. There's depictions of Saturn, looking more like Pan. Again, horns in the head, but then also light coming out as well. And it's supposed to be, showing that it's an enlightenment, an enlightened being. There's so much we could go into with this. It's just fascinating to see it. So now Zeus is in charge, and Zeus created this generation of man to be vastly inferior to the gods in appearance and wisdom. So it gives me, the line of thinking too, like we've mentioned in the Bible. There's one point where man is in the Garden of Eden. Well, the Golden Age sounds like the Garden of Eden. And then, God says, I will not strive with man anymore, and he limits man's age to 120 years max and puts a limit on it. And here we see that Zeus is causing this generation of man to be much inferior to the first, because in the Golden Age, man was very much like the gods. There's a Chinese legend that says that the gods, at one time, man was like the gods, could fly like the gods, had thousands of years of lifespan. And the gods, for whatever reason, decided to put blockages in the chakras, along the spine. And again, that caused man to all of a sudden now live at the max like 100 years. Same legends that we see in all these different cultures. Before that, man was like the gods themselves, lived vastly longer lives, had amazing powers. And I find the Chinese legend very interesting because the blockages are in the chakras. And so the first part of getting your kundalini going, which activates the pineal gland, and all these references, when you see the Pope holding his pine cone staff, that's representative of the pineal gland, and the staff is the Sushumna leading up to the pineal gland. So when the Ida and the Pingala which are the male and female nadis that run alongside the Sushumna, which is the center shaft of energy that runs straight through what we call the Taiji pole. And I know I'm probably blowing some of you guys away with some of this, but I have covered all this on previous videos, and we'll go into greater depth with it again. When the male and female energies are balanced, the chakras are open, then the energy can fly up the Sushumna. Kundalini is stimulated, and Kundalini is the evolutionary energy in man that will bring back our abilities, which is also being stimulated right now from all the cosmic rays coming in because the magnetosphere is in decline, and that's triggering our rapid evolution and our evolutionary process once again. Then the third eye is illuminated, and like the Bible says, Jesus said, if thine eye be single and full of light, then the whole body will be full of light, and this is the reference to it. When you see the all-seeing eye, on top of that pyramid, that's what it's in reference to. Now, the powers that be don't want you knowing all this, so they've hidden it and obscured it. But when we look at the eye of Ra, it's the pineal gland, and you could just look at a vivisection of that where they've done autopsies, and you could see that clearly. So it's Zeus that basically makes man inferior, and now man has to work to plant grain, take shelter. But a child could play for 100 years before growing up. The people wouldn't honor the gods, so Zeus caused them to be destroyed. When they died, they became blessed spirits of the underworld. In Mesopotamia, silver was the metal of the moon. Silver is softer and with a dimmer luster than gold. So think about this before. In the Golden Age, when they died, they became demones, which they became like the devas of the Hindu tradition. Basically godlike beings. Now they are sent off into the underworld. So here it could also be a reference to being trapped in the cycle of birth and rebirth, and that being trapped into this loop that Buddha has spoken about, and so many others have spoken about as well before, and we're going to cover a lot more on that as well. So when they died, they became blessed spirits of the underworld. In Mesopotamia, silver was the metal of the moon. Interesting as well. Silver Age and the moon, they go hand in hand. Was that because the moon came here then and wasn't here before that? Silver is softer with a dimmer luster than gold. Then the third age was of bronze. Zeus created men from ash trees, hardwood used in spears. The men of the Bronze Age were terrible and strong and warlike, and that feels like it corresponds to the age of Aries, the ram, as well. Their armor and their houses were made of bronze, and they did not eat bread, living mainly on meat. Interesting aside there as well. The eating of meat will make us more warlike, and I know there's a lot of meat eaters out there that will take exception to that. It was this generation of men that was destroyed by the flood in the days of Prometheus' son, Deucalion and Pyrrha. When the bronze men died, they went to the underworld. Copper and a component of bronze is the metal of Ishtar in Babylon. In Greek and older myths, bronze was connected to weapons, war, and warfare, and their armor and houses were made of bronze. Then we have the Age of Heroes. For the fourth age, Hesiod dropped the metallurgical metaphor, because this is kind of like an aside, and so if you've ever watched like a live play and stuff, sometimes there will be a period where the guy will come straight out and come to the audience and tell the audience directly what's going on. And so in the fourth age, Hesiod dropped the metallurgical metaphor and instead called it the Age of Heroes. The Age of Heroes was a historical period to Hesiod, referring to the Mycenaean age and the stories told by Hesiod's fellow poet Homer. The Age of Heroes was a better and more just time when the men called Theoi were demigods, strong, brave, and heroic, and many were destroyed by the great wars of Greek legend. After death, some went to the underworld, some others went to the islands of the blessed ones. So that is interesting, because there is your Genesis 6 as well. And it's very, very curious. Because, here you have Genesis 6, you have the sons of the gods coming into the daughters of man, and unto them were born giants, men of renown, mighty men of old, heroes, demigods. And then the Bible jumps to the flood. Basically, because there's nothing but wickedness here, God destroys everything. Why would God destroy these demigods, these mighty men of old, these heroes?
Well, unless there was something about them that was going to harm him.
Yeah, see, again, this is obvious. This is what becomes obvious when we cross-study and cross-reference, and then we go within. And, the truth will set you free, and you no longer be a slave to dogma that has enshrouded our minds in this very, very dark age of which we are leaving now. So, fascinating, again. The fifth age was the Iron Age, Hesiod's name for his own time, and in it all modern men were created by Zeus as evil and selfish, burdened with weariness and sorrow. All manner of evils came into being during this age. Piety and other virtue disappeared, and most of the gods who were left on earth abandoned it. Hesiod predicted that Zeus would destroy this race someday. Iron is the hardest metal and the most troublesome to work, forged in fire and hammered. So the 5 ages of man is a long passage about the continuous degeneration, tracing the lives of men as descending from a state of primitive innocence to evil, with the single exception of the age of heroes. Some scholars have noted Hesiod wove the mythic and the realistic together, creating a blended story based on ancient tale that could be referenced and learned from. Really fascinating. I'll have the PDF for you guys as well. It goes with the yugas. Like if you take the age of the heroes out and say that that's basically a transitionary period, you have Satya Yuga, which is the golden age, the Treta Yuga, silver, and Dwapara, which is the bronze, and then we have the dark age, the Kali Yuga. And you see we descend into the Kali age, and by the way, the golden age is the longest, followed by the silver, the next longest, then the bronze. The dark age is not, it's the shortest period. And then we descend up into the bronze age yet again. And so there's not all perfect agreement on how long these yugas last. Some think they last, hundreds of thousands of years or even more. Sri Yukteswara, teacher and guru of Yogananda, who brought yoga to the West and into so many minds and hearts of so many people, says that we are already in the Dwapara and we have left the Kali Yuga, basically like around 1700s-ish, with the Renaissance. We started to get a little enlightened. And so, we're heading back up through this cycle. And it all has to do with the position of where we are in the galaxy, where our solar system is in the galaxy. That is what brings us the conditions for these different ages. As some areas are basically, there's been atrocities committed in them. There's darker energies, darker spirits, darker beings in these certain areas. And this gets me to the works of Peter Dunev, who spoke about this as well and said, we are now about to leave. We are just leaving. And he died many years ago. He was a Bulgarian mystic and also amazing musician and practitioner of his own type of QiGong energy work. And so, he said that we were going to be leaving this area where there's these dark atrocities have been committed and darker energies like what we would call the Draco, for instance, where they are. So we're leaving their area. And we are going to be hit with a blast, a galactic superwave of energy that's going to transform all of us in all things, not just on this planet, not just even in our solar system.
Yes, it's very important. This energy that's going to hit us is really going to knock some people on their butts.
This is why it's so important for us to do the spiritual work. And, like today was, it's been a wonderful day for us, and it's been relatively typical. As is the tradition, we start with like a ritualistic bath just to purify and cleanse the mind and to sweat and detoxify as well. And then we went to our mantras and meditation. And I did like 15 cycles of 108 repetitions in order to get deep and to, get yourself into that place where you're able to really have clarity, the mind, the thoughts cease, and then illumination can begin. And then after that, we did our QiGong with our standing meditation. So with the Satya Yuga, It's really fascinating to see. The average human lifespan, according to the Vedic tradition, is 100,000 years. 100,000 years is the average human lifespan. The average human height, 32 feet. Who were the giants? Perhaps we were the giants.
I think so.
Yes, most definitely. Birth and death cycles, 8 cycles. The approximate percentage of evil in the world, 0%. And so then we go to the Treta Yuga, which is the Silver Age. Instead of 100,000 years, the average human life is 10,000 years. The average human height drops to 21 feet, and the birth and death cycles, 6 cycles. And about 25% of the world is now starting to get evil. And then we have the Dwapara, which, according to Yugaswar, we're in now. And the average human lifespan's 1,000 years. Of course, we're just starting to enter it. So then you go from 100,000 down to 10,000, down to 1,000 years, and the average human height, 11 feet. And think about all the different giants that we've talked about these gigantic giants that, sound like titans, do they not? All the way down to, those that sound like, more like towards the Anunnaki side. And percentage of evil, 50%. And so 21 cycles of birth and rebirth. Birth, death, and rebirth. Then the Kali Yuga, lifespan 100 years. Remember the Bible saying, I will not strive with man no more. His lifespan shall be no more than 120 years. Boom. There you go. Well, they're pretty much in agreement there. The average human height, 5.5 feet. And birth and death cycles, 42 cycles. And evil is 75% of what we see in the world, according to this tradition. Very, very interesting, is it not, how it goes along so well?
Well, yeah, there's definitely a lot of parallels there.
Most definitely, a lot of parallels. And it really does also get into the whole giants. Why do we find all these giants? Why do we find the giant bodies and everything? And again, the body is just a vessel. It's a vehicle. It's something that the eternal soul inhabits and uses to get around in this 3D reality. So very, very interesting. And we could see how, when we look at the Bible, we have just tiny little snippets. But when you start looking everywhere, then the picture gets a lot more clear. And then the Hopi people. And the Hopi are very special people as we see them. And I think that they're doing this to replicate the antennas, perhaps, of the ant people, the Anunnaki, that helped them and actually brought them into the planet to survive the cataclysms going on the surface, and then let them know when it was okay to come back out onto the surface. And so the Hopi who inhabit the Four Corners area, they have a prophecy of the fifth world. So they say there's been 4, and we're at the end of the 4th and the beginning of the 5th right now.
I do love the Hopi prophecies. They're a lot of fun.
It is really interesting, when we start looking at all this. I mean, things go hand in hand in hand. And if we just burden ourselves with basically only looking at one particular tradition, you're never going to get the big picture. And you have to also, take the time for that spiritual practice and to go within. It's absolutely critical now. As we've been saying, what the galactics are telling us all the time, the most important thing is to raise your vibrations. Raise your vibrations. That's how we raise the vibrations of the planet.
Incredibly important, you guys. Super important to raise your vibration and take time to go within. And I know it's a really horrible, chaotic world out there, but take a few moments for yourself and just go within, listen to your breath, and help raise the vibration, not just of yourself, but everyone around you.
Yeah, in my practice today, after going through the 15 cycles of 108 repetitions, then I just basically just let everything go. And there's this sensation of expansion because your consciousness is expanding outside of your body. Then you have what's called self-realization, where you recognize and know that you're not the body. You have a body. People have had out-of-death experiences, and then they know, and they're changed forever. And I have several friends that have been clinically dead for different periods of time. One for 35 minutes, toe tagged, put in the morgue, and then came back. Literally, they don't view things the same way. They don't have fear of death at all. And they don't feel that when they die, there's going to be a horrible judgment and they're going to be cast into a lake of fire. Quite the opposite. They feel the love on the other side. And what they feel is that it's a relief and a release when you're out of the body. And you could experience that through meditation as well. When you feel yourself outside of your body, you feel that expansion into the great sea of consciousness that surrounds us, and you have this knowing. So once you have the knowing, there's no more fear. The fear disappears. That fear of death itself disappears. Not to say that if all of a sudden, you turned around and a truck was about to hit you, you wouldn't feel, that feeling of scaredness or apprehension, or you're out for a hike and all of a sudden there's a grizzly in front of you. Of course, that's natural. But just the knowing, and again, in the Gnostic tradition, which was just basically all but snuffed out for 1900 years almost, well, probably snuffed out for about 1700 by the time that Constantine got around to persecuting the Gnostics, till the time we found the Nag Hammadi, gnosis. That's knowing, but it's not book smart knowing like I'm ready for a test. It's knowing because of it being experiential. It's knowing because I have experienced. Totally different. It's totally different than learning something with the left brain. That's two totally different things.
And this is, again, they design our society in a way where we're busy looking outside of ourselves, or outside of our body, looking at trinkets, looking at things to buy, looking at new designer this, designer that. And just know that that's done by design to keep you busy.
Yeah, and as Jesus told the rich man's son, well, you really want to follow me? Well, then go sell all your belongings, give it to the poor, and then come and follow me. And as I've said before, the thought is, and it feels true to me, that Jesus, as well as John the Baptist, were Essenes, and the Essene sect, well, they lived in a communal setting. They lived off in the desert by themselves. Nobody owned anything. They had no private belongings besides the clothes on their backs. They shared everything, and they supported each other. And so in many ways, it was a very tribal society, and we will be going back to a tribal way of doing things as we come out of this dark age, as this system basically disintegrates before our very, very eyes. So it's a return back to a different way of doing things. And when we look back to the myths of the Golden Age, it was blissful. It was blissful because it was not about things at all. It was about the experience and about sharing and loving and helping each other. If the leaders of this world truly had a benevolent mindset, they wouldn't spend thousands and tens of thousands or even hundreds of thousands times more money on weapons of death and destruction than they would on actually growing food and supporting people and, clothing people and taking care of the needy. So obviously this is a very, very dark age that we've been in, but we are transitioning. So keep that in mind and in heart, and keep working on raising up your own personal vibrations. And as our buddy Rex over at Leak Project would say, be the change that you want to inspire in others yourself. That's the key. Be the change yourself that you want the whole world to look to and to say, wow, we could do it.
We absolutely can.
As always, guys, thanks for your support on Ko-Fi and Patreon. We couldn't do it without you. God bless and namaste.
Namaste.